You know just how time-consuming it can be searching for royalty-free media, and when you do find some, they're always bad. We use Artlist on almost all of our videos. There's a massive library of everything you need, thousands of music tracks that are perfectly categorized.
When you feel like you're nothing, but you wanna be something, yeah. Well, all you really need is hope. I just want you to try.
I'm still connecting my headset.
Let's go. Yeah, when you're feeling down and you're out, like you got nothing but doubt, you're alone in the crowd, just trying to figure it out. All that is cloud and this money got you feeling left out. Listen up to me now, every word that's out of my mouth. Wake up, it's me. You're gonna follow your dreams, or are you just gonna be another cog in the
Let me send out the invite.
hope in this beat, yeah, the hope that you need to proceed and be exactly what you want it to be. I feel right and I'm proud, hype and I'm loud. I'ma shout all about how I feel in the now. Ain't nobody ever gonna try to change me.
I just got back from a 10-mile bike ride. So
I'm
great.
alone in the crowd, I won't feel down. I got hope right now, and I know
I'm gonna
up
crash
and down.
so hard
I don't really
tonight.
care just what all other haters gotta say. I know everything I do is gonna make them fade away. Yeah. And when you feel like you're nothing, but you wanna be something, yeah. Well, all you really need is hope. I just want you to trust me. If you wanna be something, yeah, then all you really need is hope. Take a look in the mirror, are you seeing some fear? You hear the voice in your ear, can you start to see clear? Are the bad thoughts near? Or can you be where your feet are, yeah, when you stand right here and say no? I'm never gonna give up, I'm never gonna slow. The one that doesn't give up, never loses to a foe. The one that can show that
Send out the
myself I
invite.
can
We're almost
go all
gonna
the
start.
way to the top, can't stop me. I'm a soldier, always closer till it's over. Older, but I'm bolder, moving forward, motor, never slower. Get to know ya, don't go make me drop my shoulder. You need to believe you can achieve everything that you dream. Everything that you need is in the air that you breathe. It's in the mind that you feed. It's in the time that you bleed. Every second of life is another blessing to me. Yeah. And when you feel like you're nothing, but you wanna be something, yeah. Well, all you really need is hope. I just want you to trust me. If you wanna be something, yeah. Let's go. Yeah, it's what you need when you're down, need when you're out. It's what you need when you're sad and when you feel left out. You feel an energy drought and then creeps out, but with a little bit of hope you can figure it out. Keep your head high even when you're down inside. Through the pain you fight and through the painful nights you keep striving, keep trying, keep driving, rising, keep thriving, surviving. Nothing's in your way but yourself. Don't need nobody's help. You can make it through this hell. Take it one step at a time, one step as you climb. If you fail, you'll be fine. Get back up to the grind and never lose sight of your mission. Be driven. This life is a prison if you don't have vision. You're in it to win it, so get it, don't miss it. Your chances now, so be something somehow. Don't let yourself down.
Okay, we are up. We are going.
That's right. Sometimes all we really need is hope.
And whatever music was playing in the first commercial will probably get me a nice little copyright tomorrow morning, but who cares? We are doing Islam Week, Muslim Week, whatever you want to call it. It is here. People have been asking for this for over 7 years, and it is finally here. I hope I do well. Okay, so we are going to be doing multiple videos on Islam. We're going to be doing it all week. I'm planning on streaming straight through till Saturday. So there'll be tonight for an hour and a half, tomorrow night going all the way to Saturday. So we will finish all of Islam Week this week, okay? All right, let's do the news. First off, I want to say RIP to Benny, comic historian. If you all have been on the internet for a while, back when YouTube ran very differently, there was a group of comic people out there kind of doing the same thing that I was doing, but on the comic side. And it was Comic Book Girl 19, Comic Historian, Saul, and there's one other guy. Comic Books Explained. And their channels were small, and they became big really fast. And I didn't catch that wave. Too bad for me. I got stuck in the Tegan Tan wave that Metatron survived, but I didn't. Anyway, he passed away this past weekend. My thoughts and my prayers are with his family. He was a cornerstone to YouTube. He's one of the reasons I decided to stay on YouTube and keep watching YouTube. There's been plenty of times that I've thought about walking away from YouTube altogether, including not watching it anymore. And he's one of the reasons why I continue to watch. So I'm very sorry for his loss, and I'm sorry for his wife and his kids and for his friends. One of the other pillars is a guy named Lindy Bage, who probably people don't know anymore, but he used to be major in YouTube. And he's another guy who I'm hoping he stays around for a long time. I don't care if no one's watching his channel, because I still am. Let's see, other stuff going on today. There was some stuff in the news, but I can't think of it right now. If I think of it during the show, we'll go ahead and start hitting all that stuff. Let's get to it. Pixie Storm, thank you for joining. We love you here on this channel, and thank you so much. Someone else joined. I don't want to mention his name. I hear that if I say his name 3 times, he'll never leave. So I'm going to just be quiet on that one. But I'm welcome. He's welcome too. All right, let's do this. Islam. So for my Muslim audience, Alpha, I need your help. What's up, BS? What's going on? You okay? Tell me what's going on, buddy.
Is part of a wider political geographical region known as the Nusantara Archipelago, a massive chain of over 17,000 islands stretched out over 5,000 kilometers of ocean. Nusantara is home to over 300 unique people.
BS, you should have my actual number. I've given you my phone number before, and you should have my my email address, my real email, not the one for this thing, because that one's been having trouble anyway.
With their own culture and language,
phone.
Most of whom belong to the Austronesian ethno-linguistic group. The Austronesians were prehistoric humanity's greatest seafarers, arriving upon the tropical isles of Southeast Asia aboard sturdy catamarans and outrigger canoes over 3,500 years ago as part of a multi-millennia migration that began on Taiwan a millennium earlier and ended on the islands of Polynesia 2 millennia later.
Here I am being genuine with you. I was like, I thought you were in trouble. No, you just have a gotcha question. Okay. I will read the gotcha question after we get into it. Okay. There's a church father who said it is better for the world to burn than look away from God. Do you know who wrote it? I can't think of that off the top of my head, but I can look it up.
Throughout the medieval era, the Austronesian peoples of Nusantara channeled the seafaring prowess of their ancestors to forge some of the most prosperous maritime merchant kingdoms in all of pre-colonial Asia. These kingdoms were largely concentrated on the islands of Sumatra and Java, which served as the gateway to the most important shipping lane in the world, the Malacca Strait. Since ancient times, the Malacca Strait has been the central nexus of the maritime Silk Road, which connected the celestial empire of China to the ancient civilizations of India, Persia, Arabia, and beyond. By mastering the shipping lanes that connected numerous extremely wealthy empires across Asia, the rulers of Java and Sumatra became extremely wealthy themselves. As the monsoon winds blew foreign traders onto Nusantara's shores, so too did they blow in.
This is a different take than I've heard for how Islam became the most populous religion. So I appreciate kings and generals for taking a different approach.
Foreign philosophies, sciences, political principles, and religions. While the Austronesians were originally an animist people, constant contact with the civilizations of India saw them slowly adopt Hinduism and Buddhism as their 2 main faiths. By the 8th century AD, the rulers of King...
For those that are coming in, I will be doing Islam Week all week. We start off with intro videos to give us the background, the cultural background. By day 2, we are doing theology, and by the 4th night, we'll have an open room usually. I'm going to save the open room until Saturday. So we're going to do it straight through. We're going to have at least 4 nights straight of Islam, and we're going to get all the way through this, okay?
Kingdoms like Mataram and Srivijaya had become fully Indianized, with their kings portraying themselves as avatars of Hindu gods like Vishnu and Shiva, and styling themselves as Devaraja, an ancient Sanskrit word meaning God King. grand monuments were consecrated to glorify their divinely mandated reigns, such as Borobudur, which to this day remains the largest Buddhist structure in the world, and Prambanan, the second largest Hindu temple in Southeast Asia. If India was the place from which the kings of Nusantara received their spiritual legitimacy, then China was the place where they received their political legitimacy. It was an ancient custom that foreign kingdoms wishing to do commerce with China had to swear nominal fealty to the Chinese emperor, something that Nusantara's Hindu-Buddhist kings played along with in order to gain access to Chinese riches. Throughout the medieval era, successful rulers in Sumatra and Java often underlined their entitlement to rule by demonstrating China's approval. The zenith of Nusantara's Hindu-Buddhist era was marked by the rise of the Majapahit, a massive seafaring empire which emerged out of the chaos of the Mongol invasion of Java in the 14th century, and united the vast majority of the archipelago under its rule. However, as the Majapahit rose in prominence, so too did an alternative religion begin growing exponentially in popularity, challenging the divine authority of the empire's Hindu god kings. This new faith came in the form of melodious muezzin, proclaiming the call of prayer from the peaks of minarets.
Think precision machining is just for guys? Think again. Women are making their...
I think that machining is no longer just for guys. That's what I think, Brown. So when my channel was much more popular, I concentrated solely on Islam. I was actually reading the Quran live. And then I was reading the Quran taped on this channel. I think the top video is over 10,000 or something, or 35,000 views. I don't know. It's something huge. It's a huge number for my channel. And I was like a big YouTuber in Indonesia, which is kind of cool, in Malaysia. But I stopped doing that after about 2 years. What ended up happening is I had recorded the entire Quran on a file, and the file wiped. And it was at a point where the Dawah and Tawhid people in my comments were getting very out of hand, and it was becoming very unpleasant. They were demanding more and more sources, so they would say I needed to read the hadith, so I would get the hadith. Then it would say, well, I need to read a tafsir, so I would go read the tafsir. Then they'd say, I need to go read a specific hadith, and so I'd go buy that specific hadith. And no matter what they said, I would find the counter to it in the actual recommendation they would give me. So it wasn't a productive process anymore. I would still come to the same conclusion, but I would have to go through now 5, 6, 7 steps just to get to the same conclusion that I had already got into just by reading the passage in the Quran, just by reading the ayah. So I decided not to re-record any of those, and I stopped. Then I started the process again, but YouTube, the algorithm had changed, and I no longer caught on. So I was talking to an audience that was very small when I came back to finish the Quran. So instead, I finished it off camera. I downloaded an audio version of the Quran, both in Aramaic and in English, and I just finished it while I was working at my previous job. When I'd be walking around before customers would get there, I would do like an hour a day. The Quran's not a very long book. That doesn't exactly answer your question, Brown, but we'll get to all that stuff as the series continues.
A world away from tropical Nusantara, in the arid sand dunes of Arabia.
And
There,
BS,
in the
I couldn't
7th century
find a
CE,
direct
caravan merchant
quote for that
received a
one.
vision from God
It was
and
references
changed the
to other
world
parts of the
forever.
Bible, so I'll have
Within
to look
2 generations,
in my
the
collection,
successors of
see
the
if I can
Prophet
find a
Muhammad
reference.
had stormed out of the Arabian Peninsula in one of the fastest and most successful conquest sprees in world history, forging a caliphate that spanned from Iberia in the west to the Indus in the east. As the Islamic Caliphate was now the dominant power of Middle Eurasia, it now controlled the ports which made up the western end of the maritime Silk Road. From those ports, Muslim merchants from Persia and Arabia set forth along the same routes their ancestors had for centuries, blowing eastward along monsoon winds in search of silk, porcelain and spice. As the winds of commerce carried these entrepreneurs further than the armies of the Caliphate had ever tread, it also pollinated their faith along the trade routes they followed, with communities of foreign Muslim merchants sprouting up in coastal areas throughout Southeast and East Asia.
I don't know, guys. Is this really the content that we want? I'm going to go about 3 more minutes, and then I'm going to start skipping ahead because this is not really getting to the point.
Including Sumatra, Java, and even China. Indeed, by the time of China's Middle Tang dynasty in the 8th and 9th centuries AD, sizable Muslim communities had developed in the thriving port cities of the southern province of Guangzhou. As China had
For those that don't know, that's where I live in China.
long exerted heavy political influence upon the kings of Nusantara, the Chinese Muslim community would later play a big role in introducing Islam to the region. By the 10th century AD, the economic influence that Muslim traders enjoyed on the maritime Silk Road had increased exponentially, to the point where local rulers began converting to their religion, where they would pay tribute to the Son of Heaven and receive lavish gifts to bring back to their homelands in return. However, Emperor Yongle decided to be more proactive, commissioning the construction of a massive fleet that could travel to foreign lands and receive tribute directly. The result was one of the most impressive feats of naval engineering in world history.
To get started in data analytics, you don't.
Anybody want to get started in data analytics? Let me know. I have a link to give you.
Converting in droves. By around 1650, the majority of the Nusantara archipelago was Muslim. The lone holdout of Hindu-Buddhist statehood in the Nusantara archipelago was the island of Bali, which retained a Hindu majority population, and despite a modern influx of drunk Australians, still does to this day. Now that we have completed a broad timeline
They did say drunk Australians, right?
of Islam's rise to prominence in the islands of Indonesia, let us take a break from the when and provide a more in-depth discussion of the why.
Oh my crap, that's 15 minutes in to get to the thing that I wanted to hear. Wow, it's a good thing I fast forward.
Made Islam so attractive to the people of Nusantara that within a few centuries it went from a minority religion of foreign traders to the dominant religion across the entire archipelago. Naturally, the answers to this question are manifold, and there is no uniform consensus among historians, so all we can do here is provide our bare-bones take on this very complex topic. Perhaps the main reasons for Islam's supremacy in Nusantara were the significant economic and political benefits to conversion. Between the 14th to 17th centuries, the Islamic world was a massive, interconnected tapestry that extended from the gold-rich kingdoms of West Africa to the vibrant ports of southern China. For the rulers of kingdoms in Java and Sumatra, whose wealth had always come from maritime trade, being part of the Islamic world was the best way for them to expand their commercial horizons. In this line of thinking, the influence of the
So, is the reason for Islam's popularity in Indonesia because of trade and economics? That answer does not feel very satisfying. I'm going to be honest with you.
The Chinese
I'm gonna
Muslim
go get some
community
water. I'll be
cannot
right
be
back.
understated. Long had political legitimacy in Java and Sumatra hinged on productive political relations with China. Thus, as a number of Chinese dignitaries from the 15th century onwards were Muslim, including the illustrious Grand Admiral Zheng He, Islam became an important tool by which the kings of Nusantara cultivated their valuable relationships with the notables of the Celestial Kingdom. With that said, it would be disingenuous to say that the peoples of Nusantara converted to Islam solely for the reasons of economic profit. The fact is, people in the pre-modern world believed that spiritual powers were real. Thus, in order for Muslims to convince Hindus and Buddhists to convert their religion, they couldn't just offer a 10% discount on frankincense. They had to prove the spiritual power of their faith. Unsurprisingly, Indonesian folklore about their ancestors' conversion to Islam does not feature the droll bartering of merchants, but instead tells grand stories involving
I can't remember. Is that the reason why the Hadith introduced the idea of Muhammad cracking the moon? Is it because of this group, or is it a different group that introduced that story?
magic and miracles. These stories are too numerous to recount individually, but Jean Gelman Taylor, author of Indonesia, Peoples and Histories, provides a summary of how they usually go. A common character in Islamic conversion stories from around the archipelago is the stranger or missionary from overseas. The stranger often arrives on a ship laden with cargo. He is always a man. He has superior powers, which he demonstrates by such acts of magic as flying, moving mountains, and unexplainable.
No offense, but this video is kind of disappointing. I'm moving on to the next one. While I'm letting that commercial play that's going to pop up, I'll go ahead and answer some questions from the chat if there's any in there. Yeah, there's. Okay. All right. Islam surrendering to God is the same one religion of God through all his prophets. To believe in the unipersonal oneness of God, to work good through his law. Muhammad is just the final messenger. So there's a lot wrong with that statement, Salah. The problem isn't that that's not the Islamic claim. That is most definitely 100% the claim from Islam and the claim from the Quran. That's completely, and even I don't think I can even think of a hadith that would disagree with what you just said. The problem is that other religions don't agree with you. So there's no Catholic that's going to say Muhammad was a prophet. There's no Jewish leader who's going to say Muhammad was a prophet. There's no Hindu leader that's going to say Muhammad was a prophet. Religious leader, I'm talking about Orthodox religious in their communities. The wars and battles and structures that have happened between those communities attest to the fact that there's disagreement there. On top of that, the message of many of the Hindu scriptures, Buddhist scriptures, pagan religions, other religions differ greatly from the Quran. And the message of Christianity differs greatly from the message of the Quran. So you have a problem there. And I know the answer is that, well, those texts were corrupt, but there's no evidence of that corruption. So I 100% agree that that is the Islamic claim. The faiths of around the world don't agree to that claim. In fact, I think the only one who agrees with that claim is the Pope. And the papal office has had a very hard time getting the rest of Christendom, specifically the rest of the Catholic Church, not even talking about Protestants here, to agree to that statement. And many don't agree to that statement. Okay, let's get back to the video.
Everyone, and welcome to Blogging Theology. Today I'm delighted to talk to Jacob Williams. You are most welcome, sir. Assalamu alaikum.
Walaikum assalam, Paul. It's great to be here.
It's fantastic to have you on. For those who don't know, Jacob Williams, who, by the way, is not actually related to me, although we have the same name, is a PhD candidate at Oxford University, researching the relationship between religion and politics in modern society. He entered Islam in 2017, and his writings have been published in First Things, The Critic, Spiked, and The Imaginative Conservative. He has worked with Muslim parents groups to protect freedom of religious education, and helped build bridges with Christian organizations, including the Alliance Defending Freedom. Now, I first came across the writings of Jacob in an article in the American Christian journal First Things, which I used to read religiously when I was a Christian myself. The article was entitled Why I Became Muslim. It's a beautifully eloquent piece of writing, I think, and I will link to it in the description below. And I'd like to quote a paragraph from the article, if I may. I think it's particularly interesting and might be a good introduction to your intellectual journey. You write, C.S. Lewis, that's the Christian apologist, argued that a man...
I don't really like when people say that C.S. Lewis is a Christian apologist. He was a Christian writer, no doubt, and he wrote a lot of fiction. I don't really think he's an apologist. I think the one time that he did a debate, he then immediately jumped out. B.S. Lewis, that is an amazing question. B.S. Lewis asked the question, are women getting into data analytics? And I would like to tell you from my heart that yes, they are. But I'd like to tell you from facts that no, they're not. I hope that answer is satisfying to you, just as any apologetical answer would be satisfying to you.
And claiming to be God must be either a lunatic, a liar, or truly the Lord. Likewise, a man claiming to be a messenger of God must either be insane, dishonest, or just what he says he is.
And the trilemma goes back to put pie in the face of everyone who uses it. BS, they're talking about B.S. Lewis. They're talking about your hero.
I judged, based on my reading of history, that Muhammad, peace be upon him, could not have been either of the former two. The facts of his life and ministry reveal an honest man in full possession of his rational faculties. By contrast, it wasn't hard for me to avoid Lewis's trilemma, because Muslims simply do not believe that Jesus, peace be upon him, ever claimed to be God. Rather, we hold him to have been another prophet, like Moses, Abraham, and Isaac, peace be upon them all.
So, as someone who has read the Bible a lot and has read these portions of the Bible a lot more. I would argue that Jesus did claim to be God. I know that some secular scholars would disagree, but at least the Jesus that is presented in the Bible, specifically in John, did claim to be God. So yeah.
Final piece of the puzzle fell into place upon my learning of the long process of redaction, that's the word meaning editing, and recomposition that produced the canon that became the Bible. This was consistent with the Islamic narrative of an earlier revelation that, though true, was imperfectly preserved. The Quran was the unification and confirmation of what the Bible merely tried to assemble. So I think
I disagree with that statement altogether.
that's a marvelous quote. And just another sentence from another paragraph where you write, "This then was the hardest part, opening my heart to the truth of Islam and ceasing to see it as another destabilizing force, alien."
When I do Mormon Week, I'm hoping it's going to be just as fun as this week's going to be. Honestly, I can't wait to piss off some Mormons.
To the tradition I loved, end quote. An awful lot there, but could you perhaps explain how you achieved this movement to see the truth of Islam and presumably no longer seeing it as a destabilizing force and alien to the tradition that you loved?
Well, as I see it, there are two parts of that question. There's how I came to see the truth of Islam and how I came to see it as not an alienating or destabilizing force, because it is, of course, logically possible that the truth could be alienating and destabilizing in various ways we may not like, and that just might be how things are. But they weren't entirely separate questions in my mind, partly because, like everyone, I did not approach this question from a completely detached standpoint. I wasn't raised a Christian, but attended a church school, had a cultural attachment to Christianity, and an attachment.
So culture or Christian becomes Islam, because Islam becomes Muslim. Okay.
To British and Western traditions generally, which predispose me to see the world a certain way. So there's the rational process of coming to accept the truth of the two shahadas, that there is no God except God, and that Muhammad is the messenger of God. And that's more or less been summarized by the quote that you...
But I think almost all Christians can accept the first statement. It's that most Christians cannot and will not accept the second statement.
Gave there. So I suppose the only part of that process that wasn't explicitly addressed was the issue of the Trinity, which is the other big concern, of course, that Muslims have with Christian conceptions of God, and the way in which that is supposed to operate. And there are many Christian scholars who tried to explain it in different ways, but I came to the conclusion this is not really coherent. It simply doesn't make sense, which in fact some Christian scholars also affirmed and said that that's somehow a good thing. And that was another reason for preferring the unitary conception of God in Islam, that God is one, Tawheed, as Muslims call it. And then there's the emotional aspect, or the cultural aspect, which you touched on as well, why I came to see Islam as not necessarily a destabilizing force. And there, I suppose I should preface everything I say on this and on other matters like this, that I'm not an Islamic scholar, and everything I say is not supposed to be the correct interpretation of Islam.
You know, I remember these kind of guys being all over the internet when I was doing my Islamic studies. And I think it's interesting that none of these guys ended up being legit. The first legit guy is going to be what's his name? The guy that Bart Ehrman's doing work with. There are some guys before him, especially the scholar in charge of the translation, or the tafsir, the study Quran for Harper One, who's amazing. And I love the study Quran. If I have a favorite Quran, it's the study Quran from Harper One.
It's just supposed to be a suggestion of how certain thoughtful people might want to begin interpreting or thinking about what is authority.
But people, Muslims in general, immediately after that Quran launched, began finding fault with it. Although all the faults that they found when I would try to research them didn't seem to me to be faults at all. They just didn't like what it was saying.
The religion. So I suppose the thought process that I went through was that, well, Islam has taken, although the core of Islam remains the same, the specific social and cultural forms that it's taken in different periods of history have varied to a certain extent, and that a lot of the worries that people in the West have about Islam either relate to misunderstanding or relate to specific cultural or social forms that are not essential to the religion. To give,
so interrupt you, could you give an example of the kind of misunderstandings about Islam that are quite common in the West, that in fact not true, as you discovered in your studies?
Well, I think that very often it isn't necessarily that there's specific beliefs people have about Islam that are simply false. It's more often a mix of messy half-truths or judgments disguised as truths. So, for instance, one of the things that concerned me was the position of...
I've read 3 translations of the Quran, by the way. So, even though I know that, and I've heard the Quran in Arabic. So even though I know that most Muslims will argue that the 3 translations I read were not the Quran, they were the Quran. So they're not saying that drastically of different things between the 3 different translations.
The Islamic jurisprudence on family
and
relations.
The explanation and the explanations of the Hadith fit the passages. So.
Relationships, women's rights, etc. And a lot is said about this, that Islam oppresses women, etc. By Westerners. And looking at this more deeply, I came to the conclusion that Islam, like Christianity, like all traditional religions, has a set of guidelines for the appropriate conduct of marriage and personal relationships, and that those guidelines need not be more restrictive than the guidelines that traditionally existed in Christian society until a few decades ago, and indeed in certain respects are less restrictive.
Yeah, that's a great irony, isn't it? That Islam, seen by some now as being other and alien, as you put it, is actually quite similar to many of the social morals and relationships that we see in a previous.
This is apologetics. This is apologetics for Islam. This is not truth. There are ways to approach. I think there's like 3 or 4 core passages about the treatment of women in Islam, and there are very key ways to treat those passages. There's even ways to make it acceptable to a modern audience. But the denial of their controversy is not true. That this is, and you can see by their faces, they are lying. This is the face of a liar. And I think that's too bad, because Islam does deserve to have proper defenders. And being dishonest because you don't like something that the Quran says is just as bad as being dishonest because you don't like something the Bible says. Saying that the Bible doesn't have slavery is idiotic. Saying that the Quran doesn't have subjugation of women to the patriarch is idiotic. It does. You can't get away from one, you can't get away from the other. These are things that either the Bible says or the Quran says. And trying to sweep it away is a false approach. And it's unworthy of the book that you are defending.
Just a previous generation earlier in the 20th century. So there's a great irony there that Islam is in a sense articulating a worldview that has rapidly been lost in the West. So it's not alien at all. It's part of our history. It complements it.
Well, it's very interesting if you look at the writing of certain so-called Orientalists a century ago who say, well, Muslims are sexually irascible and excessive. And now the exact opposite point.
That's the same propaganda that's labeled against any religious group that's not your own. It's a part of othering that has nothing to do with the actual religion itself. People have said this about Christians. They've said this about Buddhists. They've said this about any unique religious group when it was rising. This is not an original idea or complaint. This is just propaganda against another. And it's through this propaganda that people get misunderstandings of cultures as being more libertine than what they really were.
Point is made, which somewhat must cast doubt on the origin of these secular moral values that are invoked to criticize Islam.
Yeah, there's another, if I may, another lovely quote here about how when you became a Muslim, when you embraced Islam, you write, "I did not change my name, my style of dress, or my diet, save that I now take halal beef with my eggs rather than bacon." Lovely touch. I enjoy the.
I didn't change my diet, but I did stop eating bacon. You changed your diet. These are lies. You are lying.
The Anglo-Muslim poetry and music produced by my co-religionists over the last century and a half. And this I really like. I am still moved by the land.
And if you drink alcohol, you quit doing that too.
landscapes of Constable, and I still feel that Shakespeare offers among the deepest insights of any writer into the vicissitudes of the human soul. Above all, the vapid global consumer monoculture dissipates when I undergo submission to the one true God. I appreciate the best of the West, not despite being a Muslim, but because of it. And I think that's an extraordinary insight, and if only it was more widely known in the West, particularly.
Islam transcends all space and time. It means surrender. You already said that, Salah.
In educational or intellectual circles, that in fact there is this profound congruence between a traditional Islamic perspective and the best in the West, as you put it.
I mean, you mentioned, I mentioned Shakespeare as an example. So one of the writers whose biography of the Prophet, peace be upon him, I read before entering Islam is Martin Lings. And interestingly enough, he also published I wouldn't say a Muslim analysis, but a spiritual analysis of Shakespeare's plays that is compatible with Islam. And there is definitely a sense in which embracing a religion that is, that it, first of all, is determinate and that offers deeper values than this secular melange of impulse, and particularly a religion that's monotheistic and obviously shares a history with the West too, does allow you to reconnect with these cultural sources at a deeper level. And the way that Shakespeare, to extend that example, is studied in the modern academy is usually just what insights does he have into power relationships. Everything reduces into this kind of...
Really? Is that how he's taught? I didn't know that.
I'm exaggerating and generalizing, of course, right. But for the most part, that's how literature is taught. It's an insight.
He's exaggerating and generalizing. You know what's another word for that? Lying. He a liar.
Into power relationships that the author was imbricated in.
This is Foucault, isn't it? This is the French.
Foucault is important. He's not the only writer who's important, but yes, I mean, it's very often on a popular level, it's a sort of simplified version of Foucault. I mean, Foucault is sort of misunderstood in lots of ways. I think he had many important insights, but there's certainly this tendency to ignore the idea that this literature could have any real insight into any enduring truth about humanity. It's just a contingent historical artifact that tells you about particular patterns of oppression or patriarchy in 17th century England. And that's obviously a view that actually robs people of their heritage. Absolutely.
And you eloquently describe how it's not just robbing the sense of heritage, which your fellow students at Oxford protested against. You mentioned the conservative Christians protesting against this, but you felt, you said there's a deeper problem, and that it was approaching destruction of the self. It wasn't just anti-Western narrative. It was much more profoundly an existential threat to the humanity of what it is to be human.
There are two broad tendencies, and one view is what theorists like myself, or as I will be, God willing, call it, is one view is called comprehensive liberalism, which is a particular set of beliefs about what is good for a human being by liberation that are so powerful these days. Sleep and feed a beast no more. For a secular liberal one and religious, valued and valuing.
He's often seen as the father of political liberalism or theoretical liberalism.
I think that to look at Locke one way or the other, the thing is that people say philosophy doesn't progress, and in a way it doesn't, but it does become more sophisticated and nuanced. And Locke's philosophy now, compared to the writings of, say, John Rawls, who is the most influential political theorist of the last half century, looks very, very simplistic. So he doesn't make distinctions that we now recognize and want to make. For example, the distinct...
Every year, contaminated water is...
Can I just ask about books for a second, subject we're both interested in? What would be your book recommendations to non-Muslims who, an intelligent non-Muslim who shows an interest in Islam? What would you recommend they read?
He's going to say the Quran.
Well, most of what I'd recommend would probably be the same things that are usually recommended. Everyone mentions Martin Lings' biography of the Prophet. Tariq Ramadan, despite the controversy about it, doesn't detract from the value of his works, has a very good sort of simple primer on Islam. Perhaps for your audience, who are interested, I assume, in connections between different religious traditions or who have a traditionalist bent, I do think the works of the neo-traditionalist movement in Islam, many of whom are converts like myself, Timothy Winter, also known as Abdul Hakim Murad, Hamza Yusuf, Umar Farooq Abdallah, a lot of their work is very interesting from this cultural perspective.
Just to unpack the meaning of the word neo-traditionalist, it doesn't. They are traditionalists, but just in a contemporary setting. Is that what you mean?
I mean, roughly, this is a term of art. A neo-traditionalist is usually taken to mean people that are self-consciously traditional, so not modernizers, or on the other end of the spectrum of the Salafi tendency, but in an accommodating way. They want to preserve. Timothy Winter calls it the root epistemology, so the method of deriving conclusions about morals, law, etc., but not necessarily copying by rote the opinions of medieval scholars.
Right. So yes, it's the methodology that's retained, but not necessarily the conclusions of the particular fatwas or whatever. Yeah.
When those conclusions are a matter of complete consensus. Yeah.
Yeah, and obviously there's a context in the UK which perhaps traditional scholars wouldn't know about, context in the West or in England. So it needs to be
Yes, that's exactly. Contextualizing tradition is very important. Yeah.
Right. But I noticed you didn't mention Guy Eaton, who I'm passionate about. Was that deliberate?
No, it wasn't a deliberate omission. I mean, there's so many that one could mention, but yeah, his work, I've read some of it, is very valuable as well.
Although there are some people who criticize his perennialism, of course. And I don't
Martin Lingswell might criticize for that reason too. It's interesting. I mean, the current generation of scholars I cited, the three I mentioned there, Winter, Yusuf, and Abdallah, are almost the intellectual heirs of people like Guy Eaton and Lings, but they've largely rejected the perennialism in favor of a much more nuanced position that manages to see a lot of value in other religions while still holding them to be ultimately mistaken.
Yes, Sheikh Hamza Yusuf, I've seen on YouTube video, very explicit rejection and criticism of perennialism. He simply won't have anything to do with it and never has, he says. So, yeah, that would be a very, very, very real difference. But perhaps I could just move on to being Muslim and English in the UK today. I don't feel alienated from the community in general, although I'm still English, obviously. Do you think that is there's a hopeful sign of integration and diversity within the Muslim communities in Britain? Is it a hopeful sign for the future? And what challenges do you see still facing us? Obviously, there are challenges at the moment in the media, literally.
So where I live, and I'm not going to get too specific, there are 3 very large Muslim communities here. There's one that's actually an older Muslim community from, I'm going to just say before the 2000s. They've been here almost from the beginning of the area that I live being founded, I guess would be the right word. They came in when our colleges came in, and these are much older communities. They live Hispanic, they look Hispanic, but they're Muslim. And they're usually from, I want to say, Indonesia. And then there's, and from India as well. I guess now Pakistan, but they're from India. And that's the older group of Muslims that are here. Then we have a group that came in during, I'll call it the controversies, just before and just a little bit after. And they're much more paler. They look very Anglo. They look very white, but they're short. They're like a little bit shorter than me. And I don't know what group they're from. And that was one of my best friends in college was from that group. And then there's a third group that came after, and they mix in with the, usually they're ex-military, U.S. military. And there's 3 different neighborhoods, and the entire neighborhood is Islamic in these areas. There's 2 different mosques. One serves one group and one serves the other group. But you can switch over. They're not like hostile to each other, attending each other's mosque. I find that the older group, the one that's a little taller and a little darker, don't seem to integrate as much with the 2 newer groups, but they integrate more with the local culture. So they don't wear the traditional garb. They usually wear suits, which is very hot down here. We're 100-degree weather most times. And then the 2 newer groups, usually the wives and the daughters do wear the traditional get-ups, the traditional costume, traditional looks. So I think that is interesting. I haven't met anyone in these groups that are hostile or negative in any kind of way. I have one really good friend from last year. I'm a friend for a little more than a year, but last year me and him became very tight. And he's a very nice guy. And just completely loving. And a girl who I was dating in college, who married a Christian, actually, so I know that's controversial. But she's been my friend for over 20 years now. So yeah, I'm old. It's integration is an interesting thing because the older generation, which they have kids that went to school here, their kids are also more integrated than the newer groups that are here. So even though they're sometimes the same age as the newer groups, there's just a big difference. The one's very Hispanic, and they're friends with people who traditionally you wouldn't think they'd be friends with because of national and historic conflicts in other parts of the world. But yet in the newer groups that are here are more insular. So it's an interesting dynamic. You can see the different levels of integration between these different communities of different Muslim groups that have integrated and migrated into this area of Texas. Why does he look like he's about to cry?
With a clampdown on any protests to support the Palestinians. But apart from that, what are the ongoing issues you think that face us as indigenous English Muslims going forward?
So it was specifically about so-called indigenous Muslims, people who've entered Islam from a British background. I mean, this is, I suppose that the challenge there is really, I think, cultural creation. It's creating a narrative. So we have this conception that is pretty popularly shared. Well, what does roughly a British Catholic look like, or a British Anglican, or a British atheist, or a British Muslim? And British Muslim, the conception relates to ethnicity, right? And it's become
right back. We need some more
ethnicized. So what we need to do is really create a narrative of, well, okay, what does a I'm not sure what the best term would be, but what does a British new Muslim, or whatever you want to call it, what does that look like? What set of cultural norms, tropes, cultural production do we mentally associate with that? Where does that fit in our mental map of communities? And currently it doesn't have a place. But there's very interesting work being done by people like Timothy Winter at the Cambridge Muslim College, for example. And I believe there are now other communities around the Cambridge Mosque as well is linked to that. And where converts actually meet regularly. And there is this work of cultural production slowly happening. But I think perhaps more conscious work but by more people needs to be done to really bring this about. Because if you think about this from the standpoint of da'wah, of invitation to Islam as well, throughout history, it wasn't, although there were some, it was generally not isolated individuals like ours, if I dare say, who entered Islam. It was communities, and they did so because they had this conception of what it meant that was communally and culturally embedded, and that hasn't been created yet.
Gosh, no, that's a very interesting insight, because yes, we are very individualistic, aren't we? You and I, in our approach, we had our own unique individual journeys into Islam. But as you say before, it was a much more community or communal entering into Islam. So that's very interesting. I hadn't thought of that before like that. And you referenced Cambridge Muslim College, which I really wanted to appreciate for the extraordinary work they're doing. It's not just Abdul Hakim Murad, Tim Winter, of course, but there are many other academics there. A number of them are English or British, might be Scottish, there too, who are a rising generation of Islamic intelligentsia or ilm, the ulama, I should say, in the UK, and they are very sophisticated and very well educated. That's not sounding too patronizing. They're fully conversant with the Western tradition and the Islamic tradition, pretty much like the Zaytuna College, perhaps in California, is attempting to do, what they call the liberal tradition and the Islamic tradition, bringing these into conversation rather than polarizing them or rejecting one in favor of the other. So I think that's a very positive development actually for the future.
Thank you so much to the Farmer's Dog for sponsoring today.
All right.
Yeah, and it ties back to what I mentioned earlier regarding my research that liberalism has these many faces, and there are certain ways in which we would never want to combine or have a conversation with, well, unless it's a critical conversation with certain elements of liberalism. But there are also
very interesting. I mean, can I ask a slightly more personal question? Your experience of academia as a Muslim, do you find that there is a space, dare I say, a home, but is there a recognition that you have a voice that is distinctive as a Muslim, or is it really quite embarrassingly just overlooked? And well, what are those aspects of what you're saying to do with morality or ethics or political theory, which are basically Western in nature? I mean, did you find that there is respect? I mean, by respect, I don't mean a nod to diversity, but I mean a serious engagement with you as an Islamic writer and thinker. Are we at that stage yet, or is it still a bit tokenish?
Well, I would say that my academic research isn't exactly Islamic. Just because I'm a Muslim doesn't entail that it's Islamic. Because what I'm trying to do is draw on a particular, which I keep mentioning, this particular aspect of the liberal tradition that tries to abstract from these differences for certain purposes. So not to deny them or to be relativistic, but to bracket them and say, well, look, you may be a Muslim, maybe a Christian, maybe something else, but let's talk about what we can try to at least pragmatically agree on about how to get on with each other and order our common political life in which we find ourselves, whether we like it or not. And I'm trying to say certain things about that are sensitive to beliefs that we have as Muslims. But actually, the controversial aspect of that is, if I were to mention in passing that I'm a Muslim, hardly anyone would be concerned. If I were to mention in passing that I disagree with the morality of certain sexual acts, for example, then some, by no means all, but some academics would find that very alarming. So this is more the issue. It's more traditionalism in the looser sense, or social conservatism, that is sometimes beleaguered in the academy than Islam per se, at least in the fields.
Yes, because the traditional Christians would face the same challenges then. So you mentioned something that I picked up, maybe I misunderstood you, about a kind of a liberalism which generally is not exclusivist, that it includes many possible positions. Is this not John Locke's Second Treatise of Government, which I read a few months ago, where he seems to be speaking about that, where Pacific Catholics in his letter on tolerance, ironically called, but Islam itself is has its red lines. And how does one accommodate red lines of that fundamental nature within this kind of liberal paradigm that you're exploring?
Well, if your question is on a pragmatic level of how do we do it practically, I think Muslims living in the West pretty much do a good job of this already.
I mean, theoretically, in terms of you're exploring the issue, because obviously in practice we do, but we have neighbours who may drink alcohol, or may do all sorts of things. That's fine, we live with them because we coexist, and we're supposed to be neighbours. No, I meant more in terms of your writing and your thinking.
Yeah, well, I mean, obviously there are traditions in the Sharia itself that would say, well, look, if non-Muslims wish to drink alcohol and whatever, that's not really our concern, and they have the right to govern their own communities, even within traditional Islamic policies. Yeah. And then there is a great deal of scholarship that doesn't depart from the central things on which Sunni Muslims fundamentally agree, that looks at different ways of conceptualizing Muslim politics than existed in say, the Ottoman Empire or previous historic Islamic policies. So, for example, Hamza Yusuf, that we mentioned earlier, has made the argument that the Constitution of Medina should be more of the framework for dealing with a pluralistic society than the traditional notion of dhimmitude, for instance. And I don't claim to know if, from the standpoint of Islamic scholarship, that's correct or good or not, because that's not my area of expertise. But there are resources within Islam that are not unremittingly hostile to pluralism on a political level.
Okay, very interesting. Well, finally, do you have any final thoughts in terms of your own contribution to Islamic discourse in the UK? What can we benefit from?
It says final thoughts, but then if you look ahead, there's a ton of more material there.
Your writings, and do you have anything online that we can go to? I mentioned this article, which I will link to in First Things, but do you have any other resources, and are you writing a book? And could you give us a clue about what we might expect from you in the future then?
Well, of course, you can find other journalistic pieces I've written on this and similar topics online. And certainly, I'm in the early stages of my PhD thesis, but it will certainly, at some point, be published, hopefully, God willing, and will, I hope, shed some light on these questions. And I would like to think my contribution is actually almost bridging that gap between the contribution to Islamic discourse and the contribution to wider societal discourse that I think that Muslims should take a part in, that isn't just defensive. And often when Muslims are involved in political discourse, it's from the standpoint of something becomes intolerable, and then we protest, something becomes unacceptable, and then we say, you're violating our rights, and we make a narrowly liberal argument that doesn't really engage with the deeper narratives going on, and we come late to the party and don't really understand where these ideas came from and their genesis and why they're being promoted in this way. So I think Muslims need to be more proactive in shaping the liberal polity, not.
Yeah, that's a good point, actually. Well, I think that these issues are seen as non-negotiable prerequisites for holding office, in the way that one's opinions on not eating pork are not, because it's not political, is it, eating pork? But sexuality and gender, when we go back to Germaine Greer, or so, I mean, it has a genealogy which is part of an ongoing liberal ideology, which has decades. But eating pork's never been an issue since the 1st century, probably, for Christians.
Drinking alcohol was an issue with in the late 19th century.
Yeah.
I mean, so these things, who defines what is political? Well, look, it's obviously related to power, but by shaping the landscape of ideas, we contribute to that, and we can help to redefine that. And I hope that one day society might accept, that a diversity of views about sexual morality is as inevitable as a diversity of views about drinking alcohol and eating pork, and take an almost analogous view of politicians' views on those subjects in certain ways. That would be very encouraging.
That will be very encouraging. Whether or not it can happen now, I tend to think, many people think that we've gone through a cultural revolution. Some have seen the analogy with Mao Zedong's cultural revolution in China, of course, but by which they mean a totalizing revolution where dissent is punished, rather than simply just a change of values where, we believe in things now. Yeah. So it's weaponized, and dissenters are punished, as I say. So whether or not that space can coexist with this highly militant form of secularism that we have now, he was de-arrested or whatever.
Yeah. So at that point, I want to actually say something on that. I think it's very important. Is that the headline is always, "Oh, so and so is arrested for expressing a conservative religious view. This is an Orwellian nightmare. We're all doomed." But then, if you actually look into the story more, usually the charges are dropped, or in court they're found to have done nothing wrong. And this.
All right, let's go to the next one. We'll do one more video, and then I'm going to call it a night for today.
To talk about the.
It doesn't look like they have any intro music, so let's see what this is. We might not do the whole video. We might just do, I don't know, maybe half, maybe 15 minutes of the video. So maybe like 30 minutes from now, we'll be done. Some cat is in heat outside of my house.
Hey guys! So we are here to talk about the most anticipated video.
Certainly the most requested video, which is the story of us and how we met and our
love story. But before we get into that, please make sure that you click that subscribe button. Do it right now so you don't forget.
No. We'll wait. Go ahead.
Are you done yet? Did you do it?
I hope so. We gave you time. No excuses now.
So that way we know that you guys want to see more videos like this, and we will for sure create more content on YouTube so you guys can get to know us a little bit better.
Yeah.
So make sure that you click subscribe and share this video with all your friends because we know it's going to be impactful for you guys.
Babe.
What? Okay, stop.
But it's...
Will.
Okay, we're good.
Okay.
Hi. Love story.
And how did he convert?
Yeah, but that's not really part of it. Just kidding. It's a big part of it.
So yeah, we reached 100,000 followers on TikTok. So we thought, I think it's time to sit down and do our story time.
And give you what you want. Or at least a lot of you.
Okay. So
all right. Let's go back almost exactly 11 years. And I had just moved to a little town in British Columbia in Canada. And I was applying for jobs because I was new there. And I happened to walk past this cool looking electronics store no longer in existence, which is Future Shop. And somebody happened to be working there. So, of course, she completely ignored me, but that's beyond the point. So my first time coming as an employee, I happened to actually see her, and she, again, completely ignored me or didn't even know I existed. I saw her walk past, and I'm not going to lie, I went to, look at the movies, and, it was kind of like this, just looking at the movies and trying to find her, but she had gone, whatever. And I was working as a seasonal there, so I was there from October to the end of December. And in that entire time, she never said one word to me. Time went by, I got laid off, and I got hired back a week later. Lo and behold, I'll
be right back. One of the cats are making really bad sounds outside. I'm going to make sure they're okay. No, they're not my cat, but still. All right, let's keep going.
I walked into the staff room, and there was she eating her lunch, and Russell Peters was on the TV. Now, if you guys aren't familiar with Russell Peters, he's a brown guy that makes a whole lot of jokes. And I'm going to be quite honest, being as she's brown, Pakistani, I sat down, and he was cracking brown jokes. And I wasn't sure what to do because they were really funny, but I didn't want to laugh because I didn't want to offend her. So she actually started to laugh. I started to laugh. Russell Peters, you broke the ice for us, so thank you very much. Also from Toronto, by the way, or at least the GTA.
He basically just asked me about my life, and I feel like he barely talked about himself. And most, I would say, dudes aren't like that. Usually they talk about themselves. And he just asked lots of questions because he knew that I was different. He asked certain things like, do you party?
Interject. She means different, but she didn't wear hijab at that time. And to be quite honest, I thought she was Indian because I knew nothing. I thought that all brown people came from India. Not exactly, but so I didn't know she was Muslim. Again, this was like the first conversation we ever had. that continued, and I asked a million questions for sure. What was your takeaway from that night?
Well, he asked me questions like, do you party? No. Do you drink? No. Have you ever done drugs? No. Just all those questions like that like normal people don't really ask. And I was kind of like, this is weird that he's asking me these things. But he was kind of shocked. He was kind of like, I have never met a girl who's never done any of those things. And I was like, and I think you did ask about religion at one point, didn't you? Yeah. I feel like you did. And I think at that point he had only ever heard of Muslims, crashing planes into buildings and whatnot. So it was the first time he ever truly met a Muslim. And I think I left a good...
They're a very cute couple. He seems a little clingy, but the wording of this seems, I don't know, forced, faked, propagandistic. Like if I was writing, not if I was writing, because I'm a better writer than this. If someone was writing a sitcom about a Canadian dude, generic Canadian dude, marries or dates a Muslim woman, I this is kind of like the casting. So I don't know. I don't know how genuine this is, but so far interesting.
Image for him.
Good impression for sure.
Yeah.
It's kind of funny because I don't know why, but I just kind of went down like the baby mama checklist. If that exists, I don't know. It did for me because what I wanted out of a wife, and this isn't to be a disrespect to anybody.
And it's interesting because they said that that's not the questions that people ask. That's the questions that I asked when I married. My very first date with my wife, we were getting to know each other, and I wanted to know if she partied, if she did drugs or anything like that, because I didn't want someone who did drugs. I didn't want someone who partied. I wanted someone who had goals and a future in mind. So I don't think those are weird questions at all. I think those are important questions to get down right away.
But this is just what I wanted. I didn't want a woman or a wife who was all about partying and going to the bar and going to the club. And it just wasn't for me at that time in my life. Again, I was 22 at that time, kind of in the peak of your after teen craziness part of life. So, but I knew that I kind of wanted to find a serious relationship.
They might have been married for a while.
And settle down. And I don't know if I believe in love at first sight, but certainly when I met her and I spoke to her, I absolutely fell in love with the person that she was. And it just clicked to me. I was like, that's the one. That is the girl that I want to spend the rest of my life with. And I made my mind up that night. And people say, oh, you're crazy. That's impossible, whatever. But no, it's not.
I knew I was going to marry my wife probably about a minute before I actually met her. So, yeah.
A couple weeks went by and he started to take an interest in Islam. He was a firm believer that there was no God, and he would...
From atheist to Muslim. Interesting.
Would ask me questions that were very hard for me to answer, like why is there suffering in the world? Why are there kids that are handicapped? Why do children die? Why do people kill each other? Religion divides people, and it kind of would get me a little bit stuck, but at the same time I would be confident enough that I would explain to him like this is part of faith.
My mind goes immediately to what if she had met David Wood instead of this guy.
Humans have free will, and there was just a lot of things that I felt like I couldn't answer. So at this point in time, I got him in touch with my dad to get him in touch with a group of Muslim travelers who had come basically to portray the religion, preach the religion.
Sure. That's why they do both.
And so that was kind of the first time he ever had met a group of Muslim men. So tell us what happened there.
It's kind of awkward because her dad and...
So the first time I met a Muslim who I knew was a Muslim, so I clearly could have been, since they live here and they live in neighborhoods right next to my neighborhood, I could have known them my entire life. But the first time that it was apparent was in high school. I had a friend of mine who was into the mystic think is that Sufi, who's into the mystic version of Islam, and he was amazingly flamboyant and larger than life. I wish I had hung out with him more, but I was scared to drive at that time. I had gotten into like 2 car accidents, and I didn't want to go hang out with people because I just wanted to drive straight home and drive straight back and then just walk the rest of the time. Let's see. The next time I met Muslim people who were openly being Muslim, I guess would be the way to put it, openly expressing their faith, was the girl I told you about and my best friend in college. I think her father worked at the college that I was working at, and from there I met like their friends, their group, yeah. And then from there on, I kind of knew at least one Muslim person up until this year. This is the first year that someone who's Muslim is not actively part of my life. But at least for the last, for the last maybe 25, 30 years, there's been at least one Muslim person in my life who was actively part of my life, like part of my daily activities, you know?
And her 2 brother-in-laws picked me up. And of course, like, there wasn't any...
And it's the switching of jobs. It's just with my family life, the way that it is, and the way that my work life is currently, I'm just not running into as many people.
Anything between us, so it wasn't really that awkward. But still knowing that like the 3 people in the car are like the future family of the girl I would like to be with and like to marry, is a little bit awkward for sure. So
I wonder how he took the information that he had to become Muslim to marry her.
We went to, actually, it was a beautiful setting. It was a farm back home, and it was the summertime, and it was the sunset time. And so they called the adhan, and that really had an impact on my heart. And I didn't know what it meant. I didn't know what it was, but then I saw them stand.
Call to prayer. That was the call to prayer.
Yeah. So I watched them stand and pray. And I saw people of all kinds, black people, brown people. I was the white person, the token white person at the time. But that really had a profound impact on my heart. And it just felt like this was something. And they answered a million of my questions that I had.
She is thinking so much, and he's just flowing. Interesting.
And it clarified a whole lot. And for myself, I believe that what this was what was right for me. And so I accepted Islam.
And I don't even think he knew that would happen. I think it just, his heart was pulled to it.
And so I always say that I didn't choose Islam, that it chose me. And I believe that firmly. Yeah, absolutely.
Because he went there knowing he had all these questions, and he kind of, I'm assuming that you probably wanted to stump those people, but they were able to answer everything so confidently. And I think it just cleared up everything.
Confidently is a problem.
Like question that he had about Islam?
Well, I mean the big ones, for sure. But it was more about,
it's a leap of faith.
Yeah, well, it was the unity that these people.
I'm more interested in how he went from being atheistic to being Muslim. That's more interesting to me.
Portrayed, right? That you have like people from all over, and they're all praying together, and they're all united in their faith and their beliefs. And it was just a beautiful thing that I'd never seen before in my life, like even just amongst friends. You don't have unity really. So it was one of those like the perfect storm of things that all came together at the same time, and then it just drew me to it, and I took my shahada.
Going with, like, after he converted to Islam, we kind of had presented the idea to my parents, and that was a huge no. It was a huge no at the time. My dad loved him, from what I know. And he highly respected him, but he also respected my mom and her wishes. And she was like, straight up, no, like, this is not happening. So we had kind of decided at that point to part ways and just work on ourselves, because he was obviously a new Muslim. He didn't know enough, obviously, to like be married and, that kind of stuff. And I had just graduated from high school, and I was off to college and university to complete my degree. So we parted ways. And he spent time learning about Islam, and I spent time in university. And at that time, at the end of university, I actually started to wear hijab. So that's when I embraced hijab, and I started to actually pray 5 times a day. Before that, I never prayed 5 times a day consistently. So I feel like he brought me closer to my religion and my faith, which is kind of incredible because I was born a Muslim, and I feel like Muslims, like speaking for myself, but a lot of us take our religion for granted, and seeing someone embrace Islam when they had never had it growing up really inspired me and made me really realize like this is like there's so much more to life that I'm thinking of, and he opened my eyes. And since that time, I have like never missed any prayers. Like it's incredible, like how he changed my life as much as I changed his. And alhamdulillah, like it's been such a big blessing because the more closer we basically came to God, the more closer we became to each other. You know what I mean? So,
I mean, as far as meet cutes go, that's a good story.
Went our separate ways, and then
And then
you
yeah,
in that time.
at the same time, I kind of had a few different jobs here and
Is that their baby in the background?
there, whatever. And I spent 40 days with a group of brothers that came from South Africa. One of the most amazing times I've ever had. And we went from Western Canada, we drove all across the country to Eastern Canada. Again, giving dawah, preaching to the Muslims. And we're really working on myself and working on understanding Islam, working on the fundamentals as much as I could. The next December, myself and one of the brothers from the same area, who has definitely had a profound effect on my religion, we went for 4 months. We went to Bangladesh and Pakistan, and it was all about building your iman, building my faith, and the faith of all of the people around us as well.
So my best friend from college invited me multiple times to go to, I guess, Pakistan? I'm really sure. I said no all 3 times. And one time he really pushed. He was like, "Yeah, just come." And I was like, "I don't think so, man." He goes. At the time I was a little darker, and he was like, and I had very curly hair, and he's like, "You look just like everybody else there. You'll completely fit in." I was like, "Yeah."
And he was at that point so, I would say, like well-versed, or became so well-versed in Islam that he was giving speeches to hundreds of people. And he was propagating the religion. And he by the time he came back, had learned more than I ever knew. Like to this day, I feel like he knows more about Islam than I do. He basically spent all this time, all those years, just learning about Islam. Like that was like, I was in university to become a social worker, and he was basically in university, quote unquote, like on the job to become a Muslim. Yeah. And it's incredible, like the amount of knowledge that he learned in that time frame. So much so that when he came back, he started actually
I didn't hear what she got her major in.
leading prayers in our local masjid, calling the adhan, leading the prayers, and reciting really long surahs in Arabic. And just like, it's incredible to see how much he grew in those years. It was incredible. And the guy that he went to Pakistan with, he basically became his adoptive dad, like in Islam, because he basically took him under his wing and supported him.
Absolutely.
And did so much for you. And
to the point where he actually came to propose on my behalf after we had came back from Pakistan to her family. Her dad was like, "Yep, no problem." And mom was like, just door in the face. If you haven't watched the video that we posted on TikTok about meeting brown parents, it was kind of like that.
Straight up, no.
Yeah, but after, in the month of Ramadan that year, I spent a lot of time in the masjid, the mosque, and her family would come, and her mom would listen to my adhan. And
she didn't know it was him.
Yeah, well, she found out after the fact, but and
I think she had asked my dad, and had said something like, because the men and women are separate, like we can't see the men and the men can't see us, in the mosque, and she had. I think she had asked my dad, who is this guy that has this amazing voice, giving the adhan. And then
lo and behold,
she secretly found out between my dad and her. My dad was like, "Yeah, that's him, the boy that wants to propose, or the boy that wants to marry your daughter." And my mom and him developed a relationship together, a secret relationship that I didn't know about.
So what she would do is I was doing i'tikaf in the masjid for the last 10 days of Ramadan, so I was staying in the mosque. So she would make her husband, or make her dad, bring me food so that I could break my fast and eat in the morning and stuff. And then, she would slip in a letter, and it was pretty amazing. I had never actually sat with her, like her mom.
There was an edit there. I kind of wonder what was said.
She'd never met him.
No, she met me once. I don't know if I told you that. But
what?
I brought flowers. But she's like, "Yeah, no."
Really?
Yeah. Okay. Long time ago. But that was the amazing part, is that we never actually met. But she literally, I don't know why I didn't keep it or whatever, but it was on a scrap piece of paper or something, and she wrote a letter to me and said that like she would be honored if I would marry her daughter. And this is one of the miracles of faith, is that, you know, she came across a verse of the Quran. I don't recall which one it was in particular, but it was about like giving second chances or not judging someone right away without having, like, knowing. And so that point, her mom, actually, I gave her a journal. I said, I don't really have anything to give you. You're so kind to me, you know, giving me food and everything. So I'd actually kept a journal of my travels in Pakistan and Bangladesh. And so I gave it to her to read. And I think I got it back like probably 4 or 5 years later. But, you know, so she invited me to come.
Palestine. That's where he invited me to go. He invited me to go to Palestine
for their Eid with her family. And that was probably like the most awkward time, because it's like meeting everyone, right? Her sisters, her brother-in-laws, her mom, her dad, and sitting together. So it was
like a job interview, but like they were interviewing him to become my husband. Like, flash forward, that was Ramadan, and then Eid we met him, and then the next Eid we were married. Like that's how fast it happened.
We
it happened fast
on the day of Arafah.
Literally so fast.
It's a long way to go to get a girl. That's dedication.
Like, both Eids, between one Eid, they met him. My mom met him. We developed a relationship, and we became one big happy family. And literally the next Eid, after just a few months, we were married.
Yep.
Alhamdulillah.
So it was an interesting journey. That she is the reason. I won't say the reason, right? But she was the thing that brought me to Islam, and I'm the thing that brought her to Islam. So that's why our faith plays such a predominant role in our lives, is because that's what brought us together. And that's truly what we believe, is that once we decided, you know what, we need to work on ourselves. Allah made everything easy for us.
Yeah.
Everything was so easy.
It was like every prayer that I had ever made came true, which he now gives speeches everywhere so eloquently, and he is so well spoken about the religion. He's literally won awards, like community awards, for unifying people and, you know, interfaith projects and things like that. It's amazing to see how we both
except for the fact that my channel is basically dying and their channel seems to be doing very well. I'd love to talk to this guy.
Came closer to God by become like knowing one another. And now, flash forward all these years later, we're married with 2 kids.
Married for 6 years.
Yeah,
over 6 years.
Married for 6 years and moved across the country. And now this is inshallah, our new job is, you know.
Well, right now we're quarantined like everybody else, or house arrest, or whatever you want to call it. So figure what better time than right now to do this.
Create content and.
All right, that was good. I think we're done for tonight. I don't know who this dude is, but if anyone does know who he is, I'd gladly have him on this channel. I'd love to have a conversation with him. Anyway, what will we have the conversation about? I don't know. Islam, probably. Considering he's Muslim. Maybe a little bit more about how he went from being atheistic to being Muslim, what that journey was, and what the drive was. Because if they were already broken up, there has to be more reason than just being lovelorn for converting. Anyway, peace, like, subscribe. You know the deal. Go find my Patreon. I need money. Most people don't get my sarcasm or my humor, so someone's probably going to take that serious. But anyway, yeah, I have a Patreon. I haven't set it up yet. I mean, it's set up, but I don't have tiers yet or anything. Thank you all for everything. My legs, my calves are killing me. I rode 10 miles. I took about 3 months off from bike riding, and then maybe a little bit more than 3 months. Let's say 4 months off from bike riding. And then I got back into it with a friend, but he doesn't have very good legs, so we've been doing only 3 miles, 4 miles. And then today I was like, I'm going to go 6. And instead I went 10. So I am beat. Have a good night. See you all tomorrow. I love you all. Peace, bye, respect, whatever the words you can think of. Let's do this.
When you feel like you're nothing, but you wanna be something, yeah. Well, all you really need is hope. I just want you to trust me if you wanna be something. That's right. Let's go. Yeah, when you're feeling down and you're out, like you got nothing but doubt, you're alone in the crowd, just trying to figure it out. All of this cloud and this money got you feeling left out. Listen up to me now, every word that's out of my mouth. Wake up, it's me. You gonna follow your dreams, or are you just gonna be another cog in the scene? You feel the hope in this beat, yeah, the hope that you need to proceed and be exactly what you want it to be. I feel right and I'm proud, hype and I'm loud. I'ma shout all about how I feel in the now. Ain't nobody ever gonna try to change me till I'm dead, pushing up daisies. I'm alone in the crowd, I won't feel down. I got hope right now, and I know I'll be found. I don't really care just what all other haters gotta say. I know everything I do is gonna make them fade away. And when you feel like you're nothing, but you wanna be something, well, all you really need is hope. I just want you to trust me if you wanna be something, then all you really need is hope. Take a look in the mirror, are you seeing some fear? You hear the voice